Well, I've been writing close to 10 years since my last stage of awakening. I describe to people I've been through 5 major changes in my life that I can identify. Very traumatic changes. Whatever I've done in my life, I've done it very enthusiastically, and I went all the way to the end of it until I found it was either had substance and it was it, or it wasn't it. And naturally, until you come to a more conscious understanding, you're not going to find it until you go through these stages. So beginning stage was in college, and I had my awakening from the Woodstock generation. And our whole generation was saying no to the world we were born into. It was clearly wrong. We didn't know what the real answer was, but we moved into a hunger for natural living, not living for a job and for money. And the term military-industrial complex was a very common terminology for the system. And it still is. But, and it was a very big awakening, and at the time, but as we've come to find out, it was hijacked by the CIA and so many different social engineers to keep us from being active in a way, especially against the war at the time. They didn't want that. So they actually introduced a lot of the psychedelic drugs and adulterated drugs, and they moved it into commercialism, and a lot of people were hurt very badly. But it backfired, as the Matrix always does. It backfired because so many people did wake up and had a transcendent experience to find that there's more to this life than meets the eye. And it wasn't religion, it was experiential. So that led me to leave. When I went to 4 years of university, and then I didn't graduate, I just left. I went out, I'm from the East Coast in the US. I went out to California to see what the deal was and maybe find sympathetic people. But I was disillusioned because there was so much drugs and so much who's cool, and everything had taken on a new, the latest scene kind of thing. And it wasn't what I was looking for, so I took off. I went into the rest of the world for 23 years, almost 25 years. I went to 45 countries. I lived extensively in at least 17 countries. Lived there and survived there. So I know people from the Middle East. I know what the Latin people are in many countries in Latin America. I was there for 13 years now. And that opened my eyes to so many things. And during this time, I was going through a lot of different spiritual phases, experimenting with things and learning. And, and my whole generation went through all kinds of experimental communities. And then I had 2 children with my first wife, born in India, and my third one was born in Iran during the revolution. And my wife was 9 months pregnant with our son, so we couldn't leave the country, and there was fighting in the streets, machine guns. The bank on our corner was burned down. But it was a very valuable experience, and I tell people, like in the United States or the Western economies, when it crumbles and there's real problems, be it martial law or serious economic deficiencies, things change. And you're dealing with people who morph. You get your information by rumor. There's a lot of fear in the atmosphere. So the best thing we can do is to be prepared spiritually for what's ahead of time, because it's a little late when you can't find food to try to get centered. You better be centered ahead of time, like a surfer. You better be paddling into the wave when that comes, or the wave's just going to crush him. So anyway, I went through a big phase there. Then I went back to the States. I got into some. We had all these kids and grandkids. I needed to raise some money. I was getting older, and got into a sales situation, and I was crazy successful just for 7 years. But I had these were micro lives that I was being allowed to live, which gave me the experiential background, so that when I had my final wake up, which was in the mid-2000s, it all came into perspective. And I've been a writer and editor all my life, on and off. I worked in TV stations, I worked with magazines, publications, but I've always worked with people. I love people, but always with a motive for social change and social justice. And what do you do about this mess that's being made? But following 9/11, that's another event that backfired for them, because a lot of people woke up because of that. And having my kids and grandkids and my friends and the rest of humanity, you can't stand idly by and watch this machine deceive a whole so many millions around the world with this horrific event that turned into this monster that not only attacked and destroyed the Middle East, empowered this huge military rise, but immediately started suppressing personal freedom. These were obviously pre-designed intentions. And so you start to say, what are my kids and my grandkids going to grow up in? It's beyond Orwell's nightmare or Brave New World of Aldous Huxley. But all these things are at play. The chemical lobotomizing of humanity, the genetic modification, the transhuman agenda, artificial intelligence now. These are very serious. It's similar to the boiling frog, where the boiling frog is, if you boil the water slowly enough, the frog says, oh, it's okay, and he adjusts, and eventually he falls asleep, and he's cooked. But if they turn it up too fast, the frog wakes up and hops out. Well, it's my personal conviction that now that they're getting sloppy, they sense our awakening. We are very much leading the world with our conscious evolution and our willingness to activate. And I know that that's in your heart clearly and in the heart of so many here. And it's not futile. We have a lot to be encouraged about and very inspired about. But the reason I wrote the book is I've been writing articles as I perceive things on a blog, eventually became a blog. My son said, Dad, you're writing so much, you're sending emails, why don't you start a blog? I said, what's a blog? How do you do that? And so he set me up. And it eventually became a website, and my writings were going all over the world. I was hearing, what is this? And I wasn't writing for popularity or money or anything. I had to say what I'm learning. And it started to morph, and I didn't want my picture on anything. I didn't want anything to do with anything. People said, listen, we'd like to interview you. Well, we'd like to talk about this. And then Ian invited me up last year, and I did my first event. And I had to be, I didn't want it. It wasn't what I was looking for. But it was the universe calling. You better answer the call. You better say yes. And it wasn't like I was threatened, but it was, it wasn't comfortable. But as I stepped into it, it only gets better. It only gets more thrilling. So my book called You Are the Awakening is a compilation of articles I've written over the years. And I've written hundreds and hundreds of articles because as things come up, I like to digest, be it the news and geopolitical situations or trends such as transhumanism or just the question of alien presence here or alternative views of our human origins. Are we star people? Is that what are some of us star people?
Star seeds?
Yeah. Are some of us reptilians? Are people living inside the earth? Is the earth round? Are 7 billion people? Why should I believe that? I don't know how many people are here. Why should I believe anything they say? So your whole paradigm gets freed. And then more and more we move from mind down to heart, where we become more intuitive and willing to open up our senses in all kinds of ways to discover what's really going on here. And then it becomes really fun. But at the same time, we're in a very dark age with dark energies of all sorts, whether you want to call them demons, jinn, archons, Wetiko, all these different things. And they're all important to learn about. It is known in the human collective psyche that we have, call it a parasitic or a virus that is attacking humanity and living off of humanity's energy. And so where are we in this? So what do we do? So for me, I like to digest it, take it apart with the intention of helping others through this process. Because when you wake up, it's not easy. I just spoke with someone downstairs here at the event. She's in the first 2 years still, and she's still angry and upset and horrified. And she's saying, how long is this going to last? I said, it won't be much longer. There are trends, but you've got to get past it, and you will. But the way to do it is see through this ugliness that's being projected on us like a giant black spider web. See through it, because it's a veil to keep us with a purpose, to keep us from connecting with Source. It's not just out there. The veil's also in our heart. That's the real us, the real essence, authentic self. And that's going to bring about changes in our personal life. And that's why I say you are the awakening. It is an individual thing. We can't wait for a collective movement. We can't look to leadership, external leadership. It is each of us. That's why they've ultimately hijacked that with God, the external God, and submit and follow. Well, what is God? I mean, it's source, and we are connected to it. We are part of God, if you want to call it that. But I don't even use that word because of all the baggage. It's baggage from centuries. It's in our, like archetypes in our collective mind. But helping people identify, not only see through the process they're going through, be it understanding how language is manipulated, how belief systems are all bogus. It doesn't matter what the beliefs are. You don't believe anything. Either you know it or you don't know it. Either you're pursuing to know, you'd like to know, or you're fishing for more things, fine. But don't say, I believe something. It's so vague. It's like hope. I hope there'll be change one day. What does that mean? It's very, very dangerous words or concepts. That's our manipulated language. And I talk a lot about that. But there's all these different aspects to digest. And so I'm sharing my process through my writings. And but always to me, it's always empowering, because ultimately we find truth. If we're sincerely hearted, like they say, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. It's the truth. I mean, if we're pure in our motives, the truth is there. But it's not like climbing a mountain for truth, although, I mean, the metaphor applies in a lot of ways. But the awakening is happening before our very eyes. And for years, I've been writing about it, and people say, oh, he's Pollyanna, everything's cool, everything. I don't write like that at all. It's not what I'm saying. But the fact is, truth is good news. Truth is so-called positive. But it's really lies versus truth. It's not positive, negative, because even the negative is for our growth. For some reason, the universe has allowed these other things. But that also implies directly that we have the power to, be it confront, dispel, or not attached to, and thus it just loses its power, these so-called negative forces. Because so much of it is powered by our reaction to it. This is a co-creation we're in. So that's why some of these teachings, like the Wetiko teachings and the Archon agenda and the Gnostic teachings, are so resonant to me that they make such sense. In the Wetiko teachings, they say that once this thing has infected somebody, and we've all been infected to some degree because we're living in this environment, just like breathing in the chemtrails, but we have blind spots, and by definition, you don't know it's a blind spot. So these are the things that we're going to need to be made more aware of as things proceed, because anything, it's like a hurricane, anything that's not nailed down, it's not the wind that kills you, it's the debris, the loose debris that gets picked up and thrown around. So if we have that in our lives, and these storms hit, it's self-injurious. Or if we're near people who don't give a hoot about their personal condition, when the storm hits and they go psychotic on you because they didn't want to hear anything and they didn't get any spiritual roots, they're going to be dangerous to be around. And even if they're loved ones, well, I'll tell you what, we need to survive. The truth needs to survive. I mean, I tried to help them, but it gets to a point I can't help you anymore. Here you go, like the crumbs for the birds. There you go. And they'll remember. Sometimes too little, too late. I don't know. But if that's what it takes for people to wake up, to go through this storm that's coming, which apparently it is a last chance for a lot of people, then bring it on. Bring it on. It sounds merciless, but we have to transcend these other more base feelings and understandings of what's going on here. We've got to see it from a transcendent, clear-hearted perspective. So that's what I do with my writings, and the book is written with the design to help people identify what they're going through more easily, help them through the process. I mean, you can't force it. People have to go at their own speed, but we do need each other. That's why we're all here. We empower each other by our very presence, and then you hear things that resonate, but mainly we feel each other's hearts, and that's what really turns you on. That's the thing. But when the words match, and things dissolve, I mean, it's a really important part of the process. Otherwise, we wouldn't even need anybody in our life. So that's a long-winded explanation, but that's my passion. And the book goes through 4 sections explaining what you'll go through, some of the aspects. It's by no means fully comprehensive, and other things that trip you up, like belief systems and things like that, language misuse, and just learning to step back and view everything consciously. Don't take anything for granted. And then the last section is take action. So what do you do now that you know this? And that's the what confronts a lot of people, and that's why this was designed the way it was. We've been talking for quite a few months about this whole thing. We've got to move it to a more interactive, where there's not just speakers and everybody goes, thank you, and they all know it already. It's nice to see, it's good, it tickles your ears, but what are we going to do with it? Well, we've got to change the dynamic. It has to be interactive. We're all the same. Maybe somebody can explain something better than another or something, but that's not the point. The point is, what is really important here, and how do we use it? How do we utilize it? Where do we go with this? How do we communicate it? And that's what's so precious. But that's an ongoing process. But the real area that I think is and Willem talked about it today. It's the unknown. We have to move into an area where we're tapping into greater power, greater awareness, and even a happier state in a way, more clear of understanding and activity. It's sort of like if you're going to battle with a guy with, if you go into the spiritual warfare metaphor, and they show up with rocks and guns, and then they come up with bigger, well, we've got lightsabers, call it, we have other dimensional things that used in love can help protect our brothers and sisters, stop them in their tracks using the power of light, like you're saying, between light worker and light warriors. I mean, I think it's definitely both, because a light worker is someone who works with light in order to protect and also move forward, light the path. There's so many things. And I think we need to learn how to activate these weapons, activate our essence, and have more intuitive trust that we are already equipped. We don't have to live in a mountain retreat for 10 years to become some attained guru or saint to do. We're simple people. We love our children. If you need to heal someone, or you want some spiritual healing, well, put your hands on them and intend healing, or if you know someone who has the gift, for sure, but do it with them, because we all have it, Yeah, the hands, yeah. Wow, we're loaded. But what activates it is our conscious awareness of it, and it's you could call it faith, because faith is knowing, belief is kind of hoping, but faith is, if someone has faith, I don't diss it. Like, even if someone is in the religious paradigm, but they've had an experience, and they want to call it Jesus, or I don't diss a faith. That's nothing wrong with that. But if you're trapped in dogma and that kind of stuff, then I have an issue, because that's hurting them and hurting others. But faith is knowing. So whatever experience someone, how they interpret it is, I guess, their business, but they'll learn it in their own process. But seeing the awakening happening now, for me, since I came here the last time, since I came to Europe, it wasn't a year ago. The last one that they did here, do you remember how long ago it was? Was it last year this time? Maybe it was.
Last
was it a year ago?
Yeah.
Wow.
September, I guess.
No, it was earlier. I didn't go to the September one, but it was earlier.
June again?
No,
May
you're right.
June?
No, it was September.
Yeah.
Later in the year, so it wasn't quite a year.
Was it with Ken O'Keefe?
No, I didn't go to that one. It was a smaller one that Willem did.
I'm not sure.
It was here last year. Anyway, just from last year to now, the difference, because I talk to people as I travel. That's what I just do. I communicate. I love people, and I'll start off with a little joke with their credit card, and talk to the worship the beast, so I'm approved, yay, thank you. And I'll make a little skit. And they'll either start laughing, and then I'll make a comment, boy, can you believe it? And then, boom, if they're open, you just walk right into it. Beautiful conversation about stuff. Sort of it's a kind of an art. You learn how to move it along. 95% of the people I talk to on this trip, and I talk to taxi drivers, waitresses, waiters, security guys, anybody, 95% were just, yes, yeah, Yeah, I mean, they were there. A year ago was almost like they were a little bit in a stupor. But now, although some would respond, and it was like work to get through. Now, people are, it's like, yeah, that's like something happened, and
More open.
yeah, it's like they got activated. Something happened, and they can talk freely about it, but without one foot on the brake. Just, you know, I mean, I went so far with this girl. We're staying in Amsterdam. Went to buy some food, and I did this thing with her, and we had a good laugh. And she was just, you know, I'm normal, maybe 25 years old. And I was talking about, yeah, that's why the information. And anyway, I even mentioned the fact that information, there's so much about all this stuff now, but the question really is, and she jumps in, she says, yeah, what are we going to do with the information? What do we do now? And it was the theme. And then I told her about the conference coming up and everything, and she was right on page. And you could tell she's not an activist. She wasn't like charged up with something. She just got it. And it's like this, the veil is being lifted. And if people could reach out and talk to people and identify that and realize the power of what we've been doing has everything to do with it. The information we put out there, the vibration that we broadcast, this is heavy stuff. And like I explained this morning, every person that pulls their energy out of the matrix and then contributes to the awakening and the raising of the vibration, however you want to call it. Language is pretty weak. You can't really say what you're trying to say, but you know, helps raise the vibration. And even those of us who've already been doing this a while, we keep raising. We have to keep changing. That's the key. If you don't, it says when you're through changing, you're through. You know, we have to keep changing. But the energy gets greater. You know, and it's a very, very empowering time. But we have to see it. We have to see through the illusion, because they're throwing up new illusions all the time. That's the danger of artificial intelligence, for example, transhumanism, actually putting chips in us now to keep us from waking up. I mean, yeah.
No.
Yeah, no, but they're in the food. There's microchips in the chemtrails. We're getting them anyway. They're putting vaccines in the chemtrails in Australia. So we're up against, so what's our solution going to be? There has to be one. So ultimately, I mean, obviously we have to take care of ourselves, but the key to our health, number one, is our spiritual condition, our consciousness. And when that raises that, your immune system responds, your DNA changes. They can't, you know, these things, they're reversible. But it's not like it takes, you know, meditating in the corner, I'm going to work on my right foot today. It's our way of life. And that's why you can't sleep and I can't sleep. Because there's so much to do. It's very exciting. You wake up and your brain kicks in. I'll wake up in the night, and if I can get back to sleep, great. But if my brain kicks in, then I'm up. And but there's an urgency, yet it's a peaceful time. But I mean, we're privileged to be alive at this time. But people have to hear, when you get the call of the warrior to rise inside, it means our self-conception has to change. The little you, whatever your game we've played as with our personalities all of our life, you know, chuck it, you know, chuck it.
Park it outside.
Yeah, and then shoot it. And it's a process. I mean, we'll always have certain traits. That's the fun of it. It's a process, but I'll tell you what. When I look at different researchers or people who, you know, seem to have profound answers, and I find them too serious, you know, exclusive, private, you know, this is the kind of thing. And then there's no sense of humor. They don't see how, I mean, we're idiots. We don't know anything. You know, we're just fools. But we open up, we're everything. And it's that willingness to be who we're supposed to be. I think that's what determines the future, so-called future. And like we were saying too, we can't carry the whole world. I need to be who I'm supposed to be. And that will arouse compassion, and it'll influence others. Great. But number one, I've got to be who I'm supposed to be. I can't, it's like a crystal, or take it like a solar panel. You aim it, oh, what's going on over there? Pedophilia. Ooh, you know, Syria, and everybody's chopping heads off now, and oh, this is gross. And down into all the occult stuff. Spend too much time, the battery's going to die. And when the low battery, I don't know if you know, but the reason for pests and insects, they attack the dying plants. They don't attack the living ones as much. There's a purpose for them. So when our battery gets low, similarly, if we're getting kind of sick, that we get attacked. Excuse me, because there are parasitic influences. This is a very live place, and there's very negative stuff. But it's only negative if we allow it in. I mean, it's negative on its own, but when we allow it in, that's when we have problems. So we've got to get our panels to the light, keep them charged. There will be times we have to turn, but you keep your battery charged. And as soon as it's starting to go down, get it back.
Do you think we can avoid the last storm, as you spoke about?
I mean, nothing is determined. Nothing is set in stone. Obviously, so much is conditional. But it's my personal conviction that there's so much in motion, and the psychopathic forces have amassed so much weaponry and insane intentions, and they don't think like we do. We're dealing with psychopaths and worse. So there's something in Israel called the Samson option, where they're told that if they're in a situation where it looks like they're going to lose, it's better that they blow everything up, including themselves. This is psychopathy. And they still have that policy. So if Israel gets attacked, they don't care. They'll start World War III, even if they all die. It doesn't matter. That's the mindset of this very weird, strange, call evil force. So these people have all this from biological weapons to, we're seeing the chemtrails every day. All these things are already in motion. And the effects of Fukushima and these other nuclear disasters are moving in on humanity. We just don't see the full effects yet, but we're going to, and we're starting to. The sicknesses, and we're in. It's a very dark picture on their plane, and so they could easily provoke World War III. I don't think it would be a complete one. I don't think we'd all get wiped out. I think it'd be designed to be a limited one, just to scare everybody to high heck, so that they could move the next part of the plan, redefine boundaries, move in their program. But they have a lot of things, not the least of which is the economic situation, which just would pull out one little card and the whole thing comes down. The world is so interconnected now, more so than anything in recent recorded history. Perhaps this happened before in previous civilizations, previous to Babylon, like Atlantis and Lemuria, but we're so interconnected and interdependent that even though I live in Uruguay, if the United States has a financial collapse, and Europe, it'll affect the economy there. It's known that in the United States now, there's only 5 days of food available for the entire population at any given time, whether it be supermarkets, storage houses they don't use anymore because it's on-demand shipping. And it comes from other countries now, or it's processed in other countries. And they've done the same designedly so, with other economies, from Africa to the Far East. So they're dependent. They raise only one crop by these mega corporations, and the people have to get their other food they used to farm themselves from other countries. And it's so interdependent, and it's hanging on a very small fulcrum that could just break down at any time, in which case we will go through a very dark time. It's a very real possibility, no matter how much we wake up. But like I said before, we have to look at this as very much perhaps part of the design to help people realize life ain't what you thought it was. And that's the reason these extreme sportsters do what they do. They're on the edge. They're playing with the fear of death and defying it. And it gives a sense of meaning and context to life. Humanity is missing that. When you wake up, you become very aware and like, wow. And usually it's a lot of us have been through a lot of trauma, and we wake up for various reasons. But you'll find activists, for example, in the vaccine industry, because it's a mother whose child either was killed or became autistic or severely disabled by a vaccine, and she knows it was, and she doesn't want it to happen to anybody else. Same thing with people with near-death experiences. They come back and their life is different. They don't live for the same things. They know there's another reality. They become public speakers, writers. You know, it takes that sometimes, often. And sometimes we wander into it just because we're so hungry for truth, and then things unfold and we're willing to go where the action is, so to speak, but it's never without a cost. It's always going to cost us, which is good, because ultimately we have to give up ourselves, and that's the ultimate prize, but it's the first thing we should chuck. But anyway, that comes to be an understanding. If you keep going, you find that out pretty quick. But I think we're going to have to go through pretty tough times. I don't think there's any way around it, because they built the whole thing to implode. It's like the Twin Towers. The whole system is loaded, and you think they're not going to set it off? I mean, they're crazy. Even if things started getting better, or we all had a worldwide demonstration for peace or meditated for a month, they're insane. They're not on our frequency. And and perhaps, we'll have to kind of assume if it's the evolution of things, it's the best thing to happen. It'll be a reset. It may be horrifically devastating. The population could go through a humongous reduction. We don't know. I was in the revolution in Iran, like I was telling you, and it's not a pleasant experience. It's a different society. The fabric of society and your perception of it just goes, and it gets, and doctors driving to help somebody in the night on a doctor's call. The young guard all freaked out. Everything's martial law, and he's got this gun, and the guy says, "What are you doing?" And he doesn't say anything. He reaches into his jacket to get his doctor's card. Blam. He didn't know if it was a gun, so he killed him. And that was happening all the time. The rationality goes out the window. And when people face these things, it's the worst trauma they'll ever experience, or lack of food. What will people do? You've got cities like Houston, big messes, big mega cities all around the world. You stop the food for 5 days, you watch what happens. Neighbors who were friends, are they still going to be friends? One guy's got a gun, the other guy doesn't. Then survival kicks in, and that's a whole nother. And that's when people go cynical. Oh, humanity sucks. They're horrible. They're just animals. Well, the condition brought it on, the engineered condition. So I don't know what we're going to pass through. I say prepare for the worst, but work for the best. What we're doing has a massive effect, but how much we can stop the machine, I honestly don't know. But again, we can't carry that on our shoulders. We can do everything we can do, and stay clear of the fear, but also tell others. I've moved out of the country. Obviously, I've got a place. First thing I did, I told my landlord, listen, there needs to be room for my kids and grandkids. So I told them, in the event of this is going to happen. They got kids in school, they got jobs, they're stuck, and they're awake to different degrees. Two of my kids are very awake. One other one's fighting it, but I told him, I said, I need space for my kids if they come down, because this is what's going to happen. And he said, okay, fine, fill the house, I don't mind. He understands exactly, and he sees it coming. People outside the United States see it. It's a bomb waiting to go off. This thing could implode so quickly. But that's true in England. It's true in Holland. And but you don't know what's going to happen. So we prepare for it, but not in fear. The best thing is community, right? We know each other. And hopefully people are starting their gardens and can find a water supply. But once you have that, keep doing what you do. Just keep doing what we're doing. Keep doing. Get together. Work towards this awakening, and community is really the answer. Where I live in Uruguay, people are getting together, they're working together. It's not like they're panicked, but it's a trend, it's an organic movement worldwide going on that is really quite inspiring, happening by itself from people who are just it's bubbling up, like the people who I was saying, when you meet people today, it's peeling off. So there's it's like on a city street. You see these weeds growing up between the stones. You can't stop nature. You can't stop it. And we are part of nature. The more we connect with Mother Earth and we let it through us, there's tremendous empowerment. Look at Mother Earth, like the cover of my book. It's exploding. There's tectonic movement, and People say, oh, terrible. No, it's beautiful. It's like, wow, just don't live on the side of a volcano, you know. live in a practical place. But it's constantly recreating. And I mean, we could get hit by an asteroid and everything goes crisp. So what? I mean, death doesn't exist. This is a temporary visiting. We're in the visitor's room. And that's another one of the biggest hoaxes they have, to keep us paralyzed. Because they feed off of us with their control system. And if we don't feed them, they shrivel up and go away, like those machines in the Matrix. Got no juice, they have to die or go someplace else. So I don't know. I'm a realist in that respect. I'm not hoping for the best. I'm working for the best. I'm doing my part. That gives me peace, and I know it gives others peace to be part of the so-called change, part of the solution, and that's where it's at. And if this whole playing field now that like we're in like a theater playing these roles, well, the whole theater burns down. Well, we know better. We're going to be fine. It's just a temporary illusion. So okay, play's over. It's time for a new one. And who knows? You know, I'll see you at Pleiades, or I'll see you. You know, I don't know where we're going to meet up. But we can't worry about that part. That's not part of it. But I say prepare, and I do tell people, if you feel the calling, get out of the north. Get out of the north. But even though I'm here, going to spend next 3 months in Europe, and I want to stay longer because there's things to do. So the safest place to be is where you're supposed to be.
On my island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not like people have, you know, if we act in fear, we're going to make stupid decisions. Like I recently heard a story about a guy who was all freaked out about being in the United States, and he moved to the Falkland Islands just before the war started.
Oh. Terrible.
But it's all about the motive and these kinds of things, you know. But if you're, for me, what I do, I knew all I need to do was bump into the wrong cop or go through the wrong checkpoint, and I want to keep fighting. They say he that fights and runs away lives to fight another day. I want to keep working. So I didn't like having to look over my shoulder all the time. And my wife and I at the time, we said, yeah, let's go. And we both lived overseas many years and loved it, and it was just time to go. The sad part was leaving our kids there, but the communication's strong with them. They understand what's going on. They're where they are for whatever reason, but they know where they can come in an emergency. If moving physically will even be a solution by that time. I don't know. But, you know, but people should prepare. At least you have peace of mind. You got a food supply, you got water, and you've told your loved ones, you've put that possibility out there, but they're also working towards this possibility either not happening or more people being so awake it's not going to influence them so terribly. So that's, you know, the solution really, again, is it's individual, that we each fulfill our part. And be where you're supposed to be. If we're more effective in one place than another, then don't run to save your ass. That's not the motive. But be aware that where you are, like in the States, I'd say get out of the cities. The big cities are going to have a really hard time. You move to the country, but then again, the city people, when they run out of food, they're going to go to the country. So.
And it's this year, you guess?
This is going to happen?
This year?
I thought it was going to happen in 2011, so I don't know. It could happen any time. That's the freaky thing. Remember 9/11? What a shift in consciousness that was. There's pre-9/11. You can't even remember what the world was like. Now we're used to scanners, and this and that. Now we're used to it, but this is very foreign compared to how we used to feel. And even before that, you could go just with an airline ticket. They wouldn't even ask you for ID. There was no checks for nothing. You could use anybody's ticket, walk on a plane. I used to do it in college. You know, you could do anything like that now. They had no passports before like 1938 or 1940.
Terrorist does.
What's that?
Fake terrorist has.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they're losing them everywhere.
Magic passports. But yeah, it's so true. But now and people. But the trouble is, over time, people get used to it. It's like teenagers today. They've never seen a clear sky, a really true blue sky. maybe close to blue sometimes, but this is it, milk. That's the sky. Look at car commercials on television. Always milky skies. They never show a blue one. If they do, it's very rare. It's
programming.
Yeah, it's conditioning.
Yeah.
This is the slow-term project. But they're having to move a little quick on suppression right now, which is waking up more people. They turn up the flame too high, and the frog's going to jump. So but they're having to follow our lead because we are waking up. We are setting the trend. It's quite amazing, really, because we are already world leadership. But I call them the piranhas, and they have to feed on us. So I saw an article in the New York Times recently where advertising companies are changing their whole tactic because nobody's going on mainstream TV or mainstream newspapers, so they're having to stick ads in on the alternative sites or sell them to alternative sites, and even then people put ad blockers or they don't go there. And they're going, how do we do this? So they're trying to get, this is an article about it. I put it in my recent article about that. It's called Bait and Switching the Corporate Piranha Pool, is the article. Because we're leading them down the road. They have to get our business, so they're coming after us. So we just, like a carrot, we lead them down the road. And we're leading them to where it's expanded consciousness. They can't exist there. They're lost. That's our playing field, So we're taking them down that road. But they're having to adjust, and now they put ad placement, they call it, in even false flag events. Toyota trucks, Nike apparel. You'll see always Nike. They're actually doing advertising through false flags, through trauma. It's trauma-based mind control. It's a sick bunch of people.
Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Nike.
Yeah. And they place them in these really, really weird places. But anyway, they're having to adjust to us. So the more we can keep morphing, the stronger we get in spiritual growth and awareness. And the higher, call it the higher our vibration, although I don't even know if that's the appropriate term. The more this changes. So we don't know. Something really cool could happen, But something really cool is happening. Like we don't have to look forward as long as each of us is doing our own part. That's the key.